Hello. Hello.
Secret Jenny.
Secret Jenny.
Secret Jenny's.
Jenny.
Oh.
Hey! Congratulations
Mazel
on
tov.
finishing your exams.
I'm so exhausted.
Oh, sweetie.
Oh dear.
How did it go?
Good. People were stupid, but other than that, everything was like the hygiene concept was ridiculous.
I don't really know what that means.
As in,
But also, don't feel you have to explain. You are very tired, and you have already done all of it.
this exam was cancelled a year ago because of Corona, and they've had a year to come up with a good hygiene concept. And
I get you.
they were really bad at it. Like, they could have done this exactly the same way a year ago. It's not like it was like people weren't required to wear their masks when they were at their desks, and the desks were like barely far enough apart. I don't think they were even further apart than they would usually be for cheating reasons. And it was like, and people weren't. They asked us to please wear masks, but we weren't legally required to, so a lot of people didn't. Like you had to when you left your desk, but when you were at your desk, you weren't legally required to. So I felt like we were 200 people in a big hall, and it was like, I just didn't get it, how they couldn't have split us up into more groups and spaced us further apart. And I mean, they aired every 20 minutes, like they opened the doors and turned on the ventilation system every 20 minutes, but it was still like ridiculous. And I'm getting my Corona shot tomorrow, so let's hope I didn't catch Corona just before.
Yay! Fingers crossed. But you're done. You're done. You did it. You did the thing. Woo!
Well, I did the thing I was supposed to do a year ago, and I still have the oral exam end of June. So it's not all done, but at least like this fucking thing I should have done a year ago is over.
One step closer.
Yeah, it's not hanging over your head anymore.
Yeah.
That's so good. And you're back with us.
Yeah.
You're back with us. Yay!
Yes.
Yay! We missed you.
Oh, I missed you guys. Well, I saw you every day because I watched loads and loads of catch up, but and you guys are so fucking wholesome. I was just like, oh my God, I love all of you so much. And I laughed out loud like regularly because the chat are just so hilarious and wholesome and wonderful. And I'm like,
Yes. Well, yes.
Hello, Lyric.
Hi, Lyric.
How are you?
Hello there.
Lyric.
I'm pretty good. I'm home alone in my parents' house, which is really weird.
Oh.
Are you gonna have a crazy house party?
You drink all their alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I already hotboxed the shed while my mom was in it with me. So I think that's okay. I mean, she wasn't smoking. Well, she was having a cigarette, but like, you know, Mom and I go chill in their heated shed so that she can smoke somewhere warm in the winter. And she had to watch my niece for a little bit, and it was right over story time. And I was like, well, I'd still go hang out there for the afternoon. It's kind of good timing.
Sounds good.
Is excellent.
Yep.
We have Tara
and Carmen.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi, Secret Tara.
How's your day been?
Great.
Oh my God, it's been so good. It's been
We had a lovely day.
We
We gave ourselves a tail.
Yeah, we had a mid-weekend. Because we're both dirty part-timers.
Yeah.
So
Pancakes.
yeah, we had
Good pancakes.
had a lie-in,
Yeah.
had
Walked down Gloucester Road and went down the charity shops and
Yeah,
stuff.
look at this sexy new
Got a new
shirt that Zach got.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh. Yeah.
Oh, it makes his shoulders look right broad.
Mm.
Ooh.
So manly and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it's a really
Yeah.
good color. That is a very nice shirt.
Thank you.
It's properly nice.
Good find. Then made mozzarella. Ooh,
Yes, and
it's okay.
focaccia.
Focaccia was great.
Focaccia was very nice.
Very good focaccia.
The mozzarella was quite good. It wasn't the best.
Room for improvement
Room
next
for
time.
improvement.
This will not be
How
our
do you
luck.
make mozzarella?
Well, it's
Get
whole
us.
milk,
Mhm.
citric acid and rennet, and that's basically it. And you will need a thermometer and a pair of rubber gloves.
Yes.
So you
Heat it up.
heat it up. So you get like a, say a gallon. If you do it with a gallon, that makes a lot. Start with a gallon of whole milk. Heat it up to.
Put the citric acid in whilst you're heating it up.
Yeah, put the citric acid in while
Heat
you're
it up to
heating it
30
up.
degrees.
I reckon heat it up to 31, between 30 and 32 degrees, and then
Pour in the rennet.
Pour in the rennet mixed with two. So rennet is an enzyme that was found in the stomachs of cows.
I know it's. I just didn't know the English word. Okay.
Oh, yes, yeah. But obviously you can get like vegetarian rennet, so we use vegetarian rennet.
Synthetics. Yeah.
And then you mix that in, and then you
Leave it for a bit.
And you
It coagulates.
yes.
The curds and the whey separate. It's very satisfying.
It's so satisfying. And after like 10 minutes, you can cut it. You cut it with a knife.
You can cut your milk.
You cut the
Great.
curds into like 1-inch cubes. It's so satisfying.
It is. Then you heat it up a bit more.
Yes.
Take out the curds.
Yes. You
Let them drip out.
get it up to 41 degrees C.
Yeah.
And then take the curds out and let them kind of drain through. And then you heat the whey to
84.
82.
Something like that. Low 80s.
82.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, I thought I heard hello, Ainsley. But that obviously wasn't
We're
what I heard.
discussing mozzarella.
We're talking about mozzarella, Ainsley.
I'm
Oh,
admiring
this is a
Ash.
very important conversation, and I'm very happy to have arrived at this moment.
So you get your hot curds, put on
Yes.
rubber gloves,
Yep.
and then you get
Yes.
a ball.
Yeah, you put the curds into a heat-proof bowl and you ladle the hot whey over it and you leave it for like 15-20 seconds. And then you can scoop up handfuls of the curd and go. And you just draw it apart. And like you
Very
do it kind of
satisfying.
like a few times until it becomes like glossy and stretchy. And then you like make your fingers into like this shape and you kind of stuff the mozzarella in between your fingers.
So it makes a skin and
So
a ball.
it makes a skin and it kind of.
Then you put it in the way to relax a bit for 15-20
Yes.
minutes. Then you eat it
Eat it.
with focaccia
Yes.
and tomatoes and fried courgettes.
Yes.
And that was our day.
Sounds tragic.
That got me quite hot and bothered, actually. My goodness. Was it when I started doing this? Was it that?
The whole thing, the pulling, the whole the descriptions.
Sound effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was a whoosh with that pulling.
Your reaction to Rennet going.
Oh, it's so good. And you slice it. Oh, you slice it.
The knife just like kisses through it, and you just get this beautiful kind of like separation of the curds. Silky.
Would recommend.
Silky.
I think Ash is also getting quite excited about this cheese.
Ash is super
Yeah.
excited.
Hi, Lisa. Oh, there's so many people.
Hi.
Doing this on the phone, we like didn't see who else, and so now I feel a bit weird having like done all of that, like all of those mouth
That's
noises in front of Ash.
Sure, Ash. Yeah. Hi, Ash. So cute.
Nom,
Ian.
nom, nom.
Ah, nom, 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 nom.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Who else
Oh,
have we got?
Secret Tara, secret
Tara,
Carmen.
Secret Carmen.
Frankie,
Hello.
Katie's. It's a doom.
I love playing Katie. It's so much fun.
Yay! That was such a like cute Katie cosplay,
Yeah.
and that's a very satisfying thing to say.
Cute kid cosplay.
Cute Katie cosplay. And Katie and Nick, we love you wherever you are. Now. Ooh. Okay. Oh my god. From now until the end, it's all going to get increasingly exciting. Monday's session, y'all don't want to miss Monday's session. It's going to be high drama. So let's mute everybody. Now, if you remember, Anouk was just about to tell Zosie some shit. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Part 6. The Kindly Ones. Chapter 1. Vian. Monday, 10th of December. And now at last, here it comes, that December wind, screaming down the narrow streets, stripping the year-end rags from the trees. December beware, December despair, as my mother always said. And once again, as the year draws in, it feels as if a page has turned. A page, a card, the wind, perhaps. And December was always a bad time for us. The last month, the dregs of the year, slouching towards Christmas with its skirt of tinsel dragging in the mud. The dead-end part of the year looms. The trees are stripped 3/4 bare. The light is like scorched newspaper, and all my ghosts come out to play like fireflies in the spectral sky. We came on the wind of the carnival. A wind of change, of promises. The merry wind, the magical wind, making March hares of everyone, tumbling blossoms and coattails and hats, rushing towards summer in a frenzy of exuberance. Anouk was a child of that wind, a summer child, her totem the rabbit, eager, bright-eyed and mischievous. My mother was a great believer in totems. Much more than just an invisible friend, a totem reveals the secret heart, the spirit, the secret soul. Mine was a cat, or so she said, thinking perhaps of that baby bangle in its little silver charm. Cats are secretive by nature. Cats have split personalities. Cats run scared at a breath of wind. Cats can see the spirit world and walk the line between light and dark. The wind blew stronger, and we fled. Not least because of Rosette, of course. I'd known from the start I was carrying a child, and like a cat, I bore her in secret, far away from Lansquenet. But by December, the wind had turned, taking the year from light into dark. I'd carried Anouk with no difficulty. My summer child came with the sun at 4:15 on a bright June morning, and from the moment I set eyes on her, I knew she was mine, and mine alone. But Rosette was different from the start. A small, limp, fretful baby who wouldn't feed, and who looked at me as if I were a stranger. The hospital was on the outskirts of Rennes, and as I waited beside Rosette, a priest dropped by to counsel me, and to express surprise that I would not have my daughter baptized in hospital. He seemed a calm and kindly man, but too like so many of his kind, with his well-worn words of comfort and his eyes that saw all of the next world, but none of this one. I gave him the usual litany. I was a widow, Madame Rocher, on my way to live with relatives. He clearly did not believe this, looked at Anouk with suspicious eyes, and upon Rosette with growing concern. She might not live, he told me earnestly. Could I bear to have her die unbaptized? I sent Anouk to a hostel nearby, while I recovered slowly and watched over Rosette. It was in a very small village, a place called Les Laveuses on the Loire. And it was to there that I fled from the kind old priest, as Rosette's strength dwindled and his demands became more insistent. For kindness can kill as readily as cruelty, and the priest, whose name was Père Leblanc, had begun to make independent inquiries regarding any relatives I might have in the region, including who might be looking after my eldest daughter, where she had received her schooling, and the fate of the imaginary Monsieur Rocher. Inquiries that I did not doubt would eventually lead him to the truth. So, one morning, I took Rosette and fled by taxi to Les Laveuses. The hostel was cheap and impersonal, a single room with a gas fire and a double bed with a mattress that sagged almost to the floor. Rosette was still reluctant to feed, and her voice was a plaintive, pitiful mew that seemed to echo the wail of the wind. Worse still, her breathing would sometimes falter, stopping for 5 or 10 seconds at a time, then hitching back with a hiccup and a snuffle, as if my baby had decided, if only temporarily, to rejoin the land of the living. We stayed in the hostel for 2 more nights. Then, as New Year approached, the snow arrived, dusting the black trees and the sandbanks along the Loire with bitter sugar. I looked for somewhere else to stay, and was offered a flat above a little creperie run by an elderly couple called Paul and Framboise. It's not very big, but it's warm, Framboise said. A fierce little lady with very black eyes. You'll be doing me a favour, keeping an eye on the place. We're closed in winter, no tourists here, so you needn't be afraid of getting in the way. She looked at me closely. That baby, she says, it cries like a cat. I nodded. She sniffed. You should get it seen to. What does she mean? I asked Paul later on as he showed us our little 2-room flat. Paul, a gentle old man who rarely spoke, looked at me and shrugged. She's superstitious, he said at last, like a lot of old people round here. Don't take it to heart. She means well. I was too tired then to inquire further. But after we had settled in, and Rosette had begun to feed a little, though she remained very restless and barely slept, I asked Framboise what she had meant. They say a cat baby's bad luck, said Framboise, who had come in to clean the already spotless kitchen. I smiled. She sounded so very like Armand, my dear old friend from Lansquenet. Cat baby, I said. Said Framboise. I've heard of them, but never seen one. My father used to tell me the fairies would sometimes come in the night and put a cat in place of the real baby. But the cat baby won't feed. The cat baby cries all the time. And if anyone upsets the cat baby, then the fairies will sort them out for sure. She narrowed her eyes menacingly, then just as suddenly smiled. Of course, it's only a story, she said. All the same, you should see a doctor. Cat baby doesn't look well to me. That at least was true enough. But I've never been easy with doctors and priests, and I hesitated to follow the old lady's advice. 3 more days elapsed, with Rosette mewing and gasping throughout, and eventually I overcame my reluctance and called to see the doctor in nearby Angers. The doctor examined Rosette with care. She needed tests, he said at last, but that cry confirmed it in his mind. It was a genetic condition, he said, most commonly known as cri du chat, thus named for that eerie, mewing cry. Not fatal, but incurable, and with symptoms that, at this early stage, the doctor was hesitant to predict. So she is a cat baby, said Anouk. It seemed to delight her that Rosette was different. She'd been an only child for so long, and now, at 7, she seemed at times weirdly adult, caring for Rosette, coaxing her to feed from a bottle, singing to her, rocking her in the chair Paul had brought from their old farmhouse. Cat baby, she crooned, rocking the chair. Rock a cat baby on the treetop. And Rosette did seem to respond to her. The crying stopped, at least some of the time. She gained weight. She slept up to 3 or 4 hours at night. Anouk said it was the air of Les Laveurs, and put down saucers of milk and sugar for the fairies, in case they called by to see how the cat baby was doing. I had not returned to the doctor in Angers. Further tests would not improve Rosette. Instead, we watched her, Anouk and I. We bathed her in herbs, we sang to her. We massaged her thin little pipe-stick limbs with lavender and tiger balm, and fed her milk from an eyedropper. She would not take the bottle teat. A fairy baby, Anouk said. She certainly was a pretty one, so delicate with her small, shapely head and her wide-spaced eyes and pointed chin. She even looks like a cat, said Anouk. Pantouf said so. Don't you, Pantouf? Ah, yes. Pantouf. At first I'd thought maybe Pantouf would disappear once Anouk had a baby sister to care for. The wind was still blowing across the Loire, and Yule, like midsummer, is a time of change. an uncomfortable time for travellers. But with the arrival of Rosette, Pantoufle seemed, if anything, to get stronger. I found I now saw him with increasing clarity, sitting beside the baby's crib, watching her with button-black eyes as Anouk rocked her and talked to her and sang songs to quiet her. V'là le bon vent, v'là le joli vent. Poor Rosette doesn't have an animal, said Anouk as we sat together by the fire. Maybe that's why she cries all the time. Maybe we should ask one to come, to look after her, the way Pantoufle looks after me. I smiled at that. But she was in earnest, and I should have known that if I didn't address the problem, she would. And so I promised we'd give it a try. Just this once, I'd play the game. And we'd been so good for the past 6 months. No cards, no charms, no rituals. I missed it. And so did Anouk. What harm could come of a simple game? We'd been living in Les Raveurs for nearly a week, and things were beginning to get better for us. We'd already made some friends in the village. I'd grown very fond of Framboise and Paul. We were comfortable in the flat above the Crêperie. With Rosette's birth, we had more or less missed Christmas, but the new year was approaching, full of the promise of new beginnings. The air was still cold, but it was clear and frosty, and the sky was a vibrant, piercing blue. Rosette continued to worry me, but we were slowly learning her ways, and with the help of the eyedropper, we were able to give her the nourishment she needed. Then Père Leblanc caught up to us. He arrived with a woman he said was a nurse, but whose questions, repeated to me by Anouk, led me to suspect that perhaps she was some kind of social worker. I was out when they called. Paul had driven me to Angers to pick up some nappies and milk for Rosette, but Anouk was there, and Rosette was in her crib upstairs. And they'd brought a basket of groceries for us, and they were so kind and interested, asking after me, implying we were friends, that my trusting Anouk, in her innocence, told them far more than was wise. She told them about Lansquenet-sur-Tarn and about our travels along the Garonne with the river gypsies. She told them about the chocolate shop and the festival we had organised. She told them about Yule and Saturnalia, and the Oak King and the Holly King, and the 2 great winds that divide the year. When they expressed interest in the red good luck sachets over the door and the saucers of bread and salt on the step, she spoke of fairies and little gods and animal totems and candlelit rituals and drawing down the moon and singing to the wind and tarot cards and cat babies. Cat babies? Oh, yes, replied my summer child. Rosette's a cat baby, which is why she likes milk. And that's why she cries like a cat all night. But it's all right. She just needs a totem. We're still waiting for it to arrive. I can only imagine what they made of that. Secrets and rites, unbaptized infants, children left with strangers, or worse. He asked her if she would come with him. Of course, he had no authority. He told her she'd be safe with him, that he would keep her safe throughout the investigation. He might even have taken her away, but for Framboise, who came in to check on Rosette and found them sitting there in her kitchen, with Anouk close to tears, and the priest and the woman talking earnestly to her, telling her that they knew she was afraid, that she wasn't alone, that hundreds of children were just like her, that she could be saved if she trusted them. Well, Framboise put an end to that. She sent them both packing with a flick of her tongue, made tea for Anouk and milk for Rosette. She was still there when Paul brought me home, and she told me of the visit from the woman and the priest. "Those folk just don't know how to mind their business," she said scornfully over her tea, "looking for devils under the bed. I told them, all you have to do is look at her face." She nodded towards Anouk, now playing quietly with Pantouf. "Is that the face of a child in danger? Does she look afraid to you?" I was grateful to her, of course, but I knew in my heart that they'd be back. Perhaps with official papers this time, some kind of a warrant to search or to question. I knew Père Leblanc would not give up. That given the chance, that kindly, well-meaning, dangerous man, or someone just like him, one of his kind, would follow me to the ends of the earth. "We'll leave tomorrow," I said at last. Anouk gave a wail of protest. "No, not again." "We have to, Nanu. Those people, why us? Why does it always have to be us? Why doesn't the wind blow them away for a change?" I looked at Rosette, asleep in her crib. At Framboise, with her wrinkled old winter apple face. At Paul, who had listened in a silence that said more than he could have said with words. And then a flicker of something caught my eye. Something that might have been a trick of the light, or a spark of static, or a stray ember from the fire. "Wind's up," said Paul, listening by the chimney breast. "Wouldn't be surprised if we had a storm." Sure enough, I could hear it now. The last assault of the December wind. December despair. Throughout the night I heard its voice, keening and wailing and laughing. Rosette was fretful all night long, and I slept fitfully as the wind squalled and ratcheted the slates on the roof and rattled the windows in its frames. At 4 o'clock, I heard the sound of something moving in Anouk's room. Rosette was awake. I went to see. And I found Anouk sitting on the floor in a badly drawn circle of yellow chalk. There was a candle burning beside her bed, and another one over Rosette's crib, and in the warm yellow light she looked rosy and flushed. "We fixed it, Maman," she told me, bright-eyed. "We fixed it so that we could stay." I sat down beside her on the floor. "How?" I said. "I told the wind we were staying here. I told it to take someone else instead." "It isn't that easy, Nanu," I said. "Yes, it is," said Anouk. "And there's something else." She gave me a smile of heartbreaking sweetness. "Can you see him?" She pointed to something in the corner of the room. I frowned. There was nothing. Well, almost nothing. A fugitive gleam, a flicker of candlelight on the wall. A shadow, something like eyes, a tail. I don't see anything, Nanu. "He belongs to Rosette. He came on the wind." "Oh, I see." I smiled. Sometimes Anouk's imagination is so infectious that I find myself almost carried away, seeing things that cannot be there. Rosette stretched out her arms and mewed. "He's a monkey," said Anouk. "His name is Bamboozle." I had to laugh. I don't know how you think of these things. And yet, even then, I felt uneasy. "You know it's just a game, right?" "Oh no, he's real," said Anouk with a smile. "Look, Maman, Rosette sees him too." In the morning, the wind had dropped. An evil wind, a tornado, the locals said, felling trees and levelling barns. The newspapers called it a tragedy and spoke of how, on New Year's Eve, a branch from a tree had dropped onto a passing car as it drove through the village early that evening. Both driver and passenger had been killed, one of them a priest from Rennes. An act of God, the papers said. Anouk and I knew otherwise. "It was just an accident," I repeated as she woke up crying night after night in our tiny flat in Boulevard de la Chapelle. "Anouk, those things aren't real," I said. "Accidents happen. That's all it was." And as the year turned, she began to believe. The nightmares stopped. She seemed happy again. But still there was something in her eyes, a shift from the summer child she was, something older, wiser, stranger. And now Rosette, my winter child, seeming more like Anouk day by day, imprisoned in her own little world, refusing to grow like other children, not speaking, not walking, but watching with those animal eyes. Were we responsible? Logic says not. But logic goes only so far, it seems. And now that wind is here again. And if we do not obey its call, then whom will it choose to take in our place? There are no trees on the Butte de Montmartre. For that at least I am grateful. But the December wind still smells of death, and no amount of frankincense can sweeten its dark seduction. December was always a time of darkness, of ghosts holy and unholy, of fires lit in defiance against the dying of the light. The gods of Yule are stern and cold. Persephone is trapped underground, and spring is a dream a lifetime away. V'là le bon vent, v'là le joli vent, v'là le bon vent, mamie m'appelle. And in the bare streets of Montmartre, the kindly ones still roam abroad, shrieking their defiance to the season of goodwill. Chapter 2. Zosie. Tuesday, 11th of December. After that, it came easily. She told me their little story in full. The chocolate shop in Lansquenet, the scandal that followed, the woman who died, then Les Laveuses, the birth of Rosette, and the kindly ones who had tried and failed to take her away. So that's what she fears. Poor little girl. Don't think that because there's something in this for me that I am entirely heartless. I listened to her disjointed tale, held her when it became too much, stroked her hair and dried her tears, which is more than anyone did for me when I was 16 and my world collapsed. I reassured her as well as I could. Magic, I said, is a tool of change, of the tides that keep the world alive. Everything is linked together. An evil done on one side of the world is balanced by its opposite on the other. There is no light without dark, no wrong without right, no injury without revenge. As for my own experience, well, I told her as much as she needed to know. Enough to make us conspirators, to link us in remorse and guilt, to sever her from the world of light and draw her gently into the darkness. In my case, as I said, it began with a boy. It ended with one too, as it happens. For if hell has no fury like a woman scorned, then there's nothing on earth like a cheated witch. It went pretty well for a week or two. I queened it over the other girls, enjoying my newfound conquest and the sudden status I had achieved. Scott and I were inseparable. But Scott was weak and rather vain. It's what had made him so easy to enslave. And very soon the temptation to confide in his locker room friends, to boast, to strut, and, finally, to mock, became too much for him to resist. I sensed it at once, the change of balance. Scott had talked a little too much, and the rumours chased each other like dead leaves from one end of the school to another. Graffiti appeared on shower room walls. People nudged each other as I passed by. My greatest enemy was a girl named Jasmine, scheming, popular, and picture-pretty modest, who launched the first wave of rumours. I fought them with every dirty trick at my disposal, but once a victim, always a victim, and I soon returned to my usual role, a target for every snide comment and joke. Then Scott Mackenzie joined the side. After a series of increasingly half-hearted excuses, he was seen out openly in town with Jasmine and her friends, and finally was pushed, cajoled, shamed, and taunted into a direct assault. On my mother's shop, no less. Long since the butt of ridicule with its displays of crystals and books on sex magic, now once more the target of their attack. They came by night. A group of them, half drunk and laughing and shushing and pushing each other. A little too early for mischief night, but the shops were already full of fireworks, and Halloween was beckoning with long, skinny fingers that smelt of smoke. My room looked out onto the street. I heard them approach, heard sounds of mirth and tautened nerves, heard a voice, "Go on, do it." A muttered response, another voice saying urgently, "Go on, go on." Then ominous silence. It lasted about a minute. I checked. Then came the sound of something exploding, very close by, in a confined space. For a moment, I thought they had put firecrackers in the rubbish bin. Then the scent of smoke reached me. I looked out of the window and saw them scattered. 6 of them, like frightened pigeons, 5 boys and a girl whose walk I recognized. And Scott, of course. Running ahead of the pack, his blonde hair very pale in the streetlight. And as I watched, he looked back at me. And just for a moment, our eyes might have met. But the glare from the shop window must have made it impossible. That red-orange flare as the fire spread, leaping and tumbling and somersaulting like an evil acrobat, from a rail of silk scarves to a trapeze of dream catchers, and finally to a stack of books. Shit. I saw his lips move. He halted. The girl at his side pulled him on. His friends joined in. He turned and ran. But not before I had marked them all. Those sleek and stupid teenage faces, fire-blushed and grinning in the orange light. It wasn't much of a fire in the end. Out before the fire brigade came. We even managed to salvage most of the stock, though the ceiling was blackened and the place stank of smoke. It had been a rocket, the fireman said. A standard rocket poked through the letterbox and set alight. The policeman asked me if I'd seen anything. I said no. But the next day, I began my revenge. Claiming sickness, I stayed at home and plotted and worked. I made 6 little dolls from wooden pegs. I made them as realistically as I could, with hand-stitched clothes and faces carefully cut out of that year's class photo and glued into place beneath the hair. I named them all, and as the Dia de los Muertos approached, I worked and schemed to have them ready. I collected stray hairs from coats on pegs. I stole clothing from the locker room. I tore pages out of exercise books, ripped tags from satchels, raided bins for used tissues, and removed well-chewed pen lids from desktops when no one was looking. By the end of the week, I had enough material of one kind or another to invest in a dozen peg dolls. And on Halloween, I called in the dead. It was the night of the half-term school disco. Nothing had been said to me officially, but it was well known that Scott was taking Jasmine to the disco, and that if I was there would be trouble. I didn't intend to go to the dance, but I certainly intended trouble. And if Scott or anyone stood in my way, then I can guarantee that they would get it. You have to remember, I was very young. Naive, too, in many ways, though not as naive as Anouk, of course, or indeed as prone to guilt. But I came up with a 2-pronged revenge. One that satisfied the demands of my system while providing a solid underpinning of practical chemistry that would add authority to my occult experimentation. At 16, my knowledge of poisons was not as advanced as it might have been. I knew the obvious ones, of course, but so far I'd had little chance to see them in action. I intended to change that. And so I made up a compound of all the most virulent substances I could lay my hands on. Mandrake, Morning Glory, you. all on sale in my mother's shop, and if dissolved or infused into a quantity of vodka, rather difficult to spot. I bought the vodka from the corner shop, used half of it from the tincture, then added a few extras of my own, including the juice of an agaric mushroom that I had the good luck to discover under a hedge in the school grounds. I then strained the tincture carefully back into the bottle, marked now with a sign of Huracan the Destroyer, and left it in my open school bag, where I was certain karma would do the rest. Sure enough, by break it had gone, and Scott and his friends had acquired a collective smirk and a furtive manner. I went home that night almost happy, and completed all of my 6 peg dolls with a long, sharp needle through the heart as I whispered a little secret to each. Jasmine, Adam, Luke, Danny, Michael, Scott. Of course, I couldn't have possibly known that for sure, just as I could not have known that, instead of drinking the vodka themselves, they would use it to spike the bowl of fruit punch of the disco, thereby spreading karma's bounty even more generously than I could have hoped. The effects, I heard, were spectacular. My brew induced projectile vomiting, hallucinations, stomach cramps, paralysis, kidney dysfunction, and incontinence, affecting over 40 pupils, including the 6 original perpetrators. It could have been worse. Nobody died. Well, not directly anyway. But poisoning on such a grand scale rarely passes unseen. There was an inquiry. Someone talked. And at last the guilty parties confessed, incriminating themselves and me, as each tried to put the blame elsewhere. They admitted to pushing the rocket through our letterbox. They admitted to stealing the bottle from my bag. They even admitted to spiking the drinks, but denied all knowledge of the bottle's contents. Predictably, the police came to our house next. They expressed a good deal of interest in my mother's herbal supplies and questioned me rather closely, with no success. I was an expert in stonewalling by then, and nothing, not their kindness nor their threats, could make me change my story. There had been a bottle of vodka, I said. I'd bought it myself, reluctantly, and on Scott Mackenzie's express instructions. Scott had big plans for the disco that night and had suggested bringing a few little extras to, as he said, liven up the party a bit. I'd taken this to mean drugs and alcohol, which was why I'd chosen not to go rather than betray my lack of enthusiasm for his plan. I admitted that I'd known it was wrong. I should have spoken up at the time, but I'd been afraid after the rocket incident and had gone along tacitly with their plan, fearing possible repercussions. As it happens, something must have gone wrong. Scott didn't know very much about drugs, and I guessed he must have overdone it. I wept a few crocodile tears at the thought, listened earnestly to the officer's lecture, then looked relieved at my lucky escape and promised never to get involved in anything like that ever again. It was a good performance, and it convinced the police. But my mother had her doubts all along. Her discovery of the peg dolls did much to confirm this, and she knew enough about the properties of the substances in which she dealt to have more than an inkling of whom and what. I denied it all, of course, but it was clear she didn't believe me. People could have died, she kept saying, as if that hadn't been my plan, as if I cared after what they'd done. And then she began to talk about getting help, about counselling and anger management and maybe a child psychiatrist. I should never have taken you to Mexico City that year, she kept saying. You were fine till then, a good little girl. Crazy as a coot, of course, believing in every crackpot notion that came her way, and now this growing delusion that somehow the obedient little girl she'd taken to Mexico for the Dia de los Muertos had been taken over by some evil force, something that had changed her and made her capable of these terrible things. The black piñata, she kept repeating. What was inside? What was inside? But by then she'd grown so hysterical that I hardly knew what she was trying to say. I didn't even remember a black piñata. It was such a long time ago, and besides, there were so many in the carnival. As for what was inside, well, sweets, I suppose, and little toys and charms and sugar skulls and all the usual things you'd find inside a piñata on the Day of the Dead. To suggest that it might have been anything else, that perhaps some spirit or little god, perhaps even Santa Muerte, greedy old Mictacatzuatl herself, had entered me during that Mexican trip. Well, if anyone needed help, I said, it was the person who dreamed up that fairy tale. But she insisted, dared call me unstable, quoted her creed, and finally told me that if I didn't own up to what I'd done, then she would have no other choice. That finally decided it. That night, I packed for a one-way journey. I took her passport and my own, some clothes, some money, her credit cards, checkbook, and keys to the shop. Call me sentimental. I also took one of her earrings, a little pair of shoes, as a charm to add to my bracelet. I've added to it a lot since then. Every charm here is a trophy of sorts, a reminder of the many lives I have collected and used to enrich my own. But that's where it really started, with a single pair of silver shoes. Then I crept softly downstairs, lit a couple of fireworks I'd bought that day, and dropped them among the stacks of books before very quietly letting myself out. I never looked back. There was no need. My mother always slept like the dead, and besides, the dose of valerian and wild lettuce that I'd slipped in her tea would surely have quieted the most restless of sleepers. Scott and his friends would be suspects at first, at least until my disappearance was confirmed, by which time I fully intended to be over the seas and far away. I toned it down for Anouk, of course, omitting all mention of the bracelet, the black piñata, or of my fiery farewell. I painted a touching picture of myself, alone and misunderstood, friendless upon the Paris streets, racked with guilt, sleeping rough, living on nothing but magic and wits. I had to be tough. I had to be brave. It's hard being alone at 16, but I managed to fend for myself somehow. And in time, I learned that there are two forces that can drive us. Two winds, if you like, blowing in opposite directions. One wind takes you to what you want. The other one drives you from what you fear. And people like us have to make a choice. To ride the wind or let it ride you. And now, at last, as the piñata splits open, lavishing bounty on the faithful, here comes the prize I have waited for, the ticket to not one life, but two. Which one will you choose, Nanu? I said. Fear or desire? The huracan or Hecate? The destroyer or the wind of change? She fixes me with that blue-grey gaze, the colour of a storm cloud's edge just as it begins to break. Through the smoking mirror, I can see her colours shifting in the most turbulent of purples and blues. And now I can see something else. An image, an icon, presented here with more clarity than an 11-year-old child could possibly articulate. I see it for less than a second, but even so, it is enough. It's the nativity scene on Place du Tertre, the mother, the father, and the crib. But in this version of the scene, the mother is wearing a red dress, and the father's hair is the same colour. And at last, I begin to understand. That's why she wants this party so much. That's why she lavishes so much attention on the little peg dolls in the Advent house, grouping, positioning them with as much care and attention as she would have given the real thing. Look at Thierry outside the house. He has no role to play in this strange reenactment. Then there are the visitors, the magi, the shepherds, the angels. Nico, Alice, Madame Luzon, Jean-Louis, Popol, Madame Pinot. They serve as the Greek chorus to give encouragement and support. Then there is the central group. Anouk, Rosette, Rue, Vianne. What was the first thing she said to me? Who died? My mother, Vianne Rocher. I took it as a kind of joke, a child's attempt to be provocative. But knowing Anouk a little better now, I begin to see how serious those seemingly flippant words might be. The old priest and the social worker were not the only casualties of that December wind 4 years ago. Vianne Rocher and her daughter Anouk died just as surely on that day, and now she wants to bring them back. How alike we are, Nanu. You see, I too need another life. Françoise Laverie dogs me still. Tonight's local paper showed her again, now otherwise known as Mercedes Desmoines and Emma Windsor, among other aliases, and showing 2 blurry pictures taken from CCTV. You see, Annie, I have kindly ones of my own, and they may be slow, but they are unwavering. And their pursuit of me now goes beyond irksome into something that almost threatens me. How did they find out about Mercedes? And how did they catch up with Françoise so soon? And how long do you think it will be before even Zosie falls to their relentlessness? Perhaps it's time, I tell myself. Perhaps I've exhausted Paris at last. Glamours aside, perhaps the time has come for me to take to another set of roads. But not as Zosie. Not anymore. If someone offered you a whole new life, wouldn't you take it? Of course you would. And if that life could offer you adventure, riches, and a child, not just any child, but this beautiful, promising, talented child, untouched as yet by the hand of karma, that sends every bad thought and questionable deed straight back at you with threefold strength, something to toss to the kindly ones when at last there's nothing else. Wouldn't you, if you had the chance? Wouldn't you? Of course you would.
No! Zosie, no! No, we would not!
What the fuck?
Yeah. I also was listening to that like, no, I actually quite like my life. Thanks, all right.
Yeah.
I've not felt this strongly about a rhetorical question since you wouldn't steal a handbag. You don't know me.
It worked for
Maybe
the
I would.
people.
Yeah. If handbags could be magically copy and pasted, yeah, of course I would.
If it was like Mary Poppins' fucking handbag, I mean, I'd be pretty damn tempted.
I still maintain.
Even if it couldn't be magically copied and pasted.
Mary Poppins.
Oh, Mary Poppins.
Cool handbag, where you get it? I downloaded it off the internet. That's a thing you can do. Awesome, I'll get one.
3D printing.
That would
is
be
great.
so good.
Anyway. Okay, so Zosie's Stone Cold Killer called it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What a heinous bitch. Like, obviously more than that, but also what a heinous bitch.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't love her. You know, like as a character, I find her deeply satisfying, but also what a bitch.
I enjoy watching you read her for that reason, because like your attitude turns up when you read Zosie. It's so good.
Oh no.
Yay.
Oh, no.
Yay.
I mean, then the best way, like, oh.
Thank you. What? I don't love this terrible, terrible monster. I don't love being her.
Drinking intensifies.
I would so much enjoy playing her in a theater play. Like, I totally get you. She would be so much fun. I just love playing terrible characters. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And like the best part about her is she's a femme fatale who's good with kids. Like that double line to play. Oof.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's so charismatic.
Mm.
Oh, I hate that. Oh.
The other thing from this chapter, though, is like, I totally get Vianne, like, she's afraid of becoming her mother. And that thing of, like, constantly fleeing and, like...
Yeah. And that, like, to kind of save Anouk from her own guilt, you know, that, like, it's, you know, she, like, Vianne hasn't just gone, you know what, I would love to be boring now. I'm going to, like, be boring and repress my children. That it's like Anouk, you kind of murdered 2 people by accident. Like,
Shit happens.
you know, like, as if I were a mother, I would be like, yeah, I would do literally anything. Like, I would totally kind of slightly ruin all of our lives for the sake of, like, taking that kind of guilt away from my child.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting asking about the different points of view between this one and the last one, and how, like, the last one is very much told from Vianne's point, almost entirely from Vianne's point of view. And it's got that very much like she sort of thinks magic exists, but it's never entirely clear that magic really exists, and it could just be your imagination. And now we've kind of switched to Nuke's and Zosie's point of view as well. And now the magic is really, really real, right? It's not like, oh, it could be, it couldn't be. Is it actually just coincidence, or is it, you know? No. Now the magic is like very, very real because we kind of have that switch.
Yeah, I think it's like, I really like kind of that it feels like Vianne is older. Like it's not, you know, sometimes you read books that are in a series where it's like, you know, the sort of main character in, you know, in all of them, even when like by lyric, that like even when time passes in between the books, like the character seems very much like the main character seems very kind of static and iconic, and like their voice doesn't really change, and you know that their sort of perspective doesn't really change. It's just things happen to them. I feel like the Vianne of this book is older. Like she seems like kind of her character seems older than in Chocolat. Thank you, my love.
Pleasure.
I think in the like classic way of older means you give up on your dreams and become dull. Like she's kind of done that, and that feels a bit like a sad version of older.
Yeah.
I guess it's rather than like, I mean, I guess rather than becoming dull, she's become scared.
Yeah, I think for me it's not it's not dull, but like in the younger one she has the, like she's still scared, but like there is more of the kind of the sort of the sort of bravery, or like the kind of sort of reckless, careless type of, you know, just kind of doing things.
Less
and
risk
that, like,
averse.
yeah, like as you get older you just get a little bit more fearful, and that, you know, people experience that to a greater or lesser extent, but I think probably almost everybody, that is like a thing that, like, I'm definitely more fearful now,
more cautious.
Like at the grand old age of nearly 32, I am more fearful than I was like 10 years ago. There's, you know, there's kind of like life stuff that freaks me out, and there's also like practical things, you know, I'm like a bit more scared of heights than I used to be, and things like that. Like
I think partly for Vianne it's also a greater awareness of the effect that her actions have on other people. So it's not just scared for herself, but scared for what her actions mean for other people.
But she's thinking of marrying someone whose touch actively repulses her. That's quite like she's not really thinking of the impact on him of marrying her, or like the impact on her kids of them marrying. It's sort of, it feels like she's trying to choose a life that's different from hers in such a like dramatic and fierce way that like it will never be bearable.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think she's on crack, but like, yeah, but I find it believable, I guess is what I'm saying, that it's, you know, I'm not like, oh yes, this is a much better Vianne, but I think that it's a believable kind of character evolution for her.
And it's interesting that you have that, because like Tara was saying in the chat that she is a little bit less fearful now than she used to be, and I agree. I think I'm less fearful now than I used to be. Yeah,
that's so cool.
I think that I'm a lot less worried about what other people think of me, and also falling into relationships where you're like caring, like where you're like hiding parts of yourself because you're afraid is something that I would do in my early 20s, and definitely would not do that again.
Yeah. I mean, good. That's excellent to hear. I'm thrilled for you properly. Yeah, I don't know. I think like, yeah, I think that's not really something that I've like. I was like very lucky in my kind of, you know, early life and in my early 20s, and in sort of the relationships that I found myself in and kind of shit like that. Like I wasn't very like fearful. Like I was fairly kind of confident and shit. So I think that there are kind of other things, yeah, like, you know, worries about the future and stuff, that's more that kind of stuff, that when I was young there was a little bit of like, yeah, I don't really like think that much about that stuff, where it's like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine, like, you know, the future's the future, like things will work out, or I didn't think too deeply about it. And now I'm much more kind of like, you know, sort of the future's going to happen, and the person that it's going to happen to is me, not some kind of like potential future person who is somebody different. And you know, like I've had the experience of like, you know, trying things and then going wrong, you know, of like thinking that my life was going to be a certain way, and then like that is not how it turned out. And that kind of makes, you know, or certain has made me more fearful in certain ways, that I'm like, oh yeah, I've, you know, kind of not trusting things or not trusting myself as much in certain respects. So, you know, I don't know to what extent that's an age thing, or to what extent that's just like you experience things in your life and they have an effect on you.
I relate.
Yeah, just the amount of time that you have experienced stuff. Yeah, how much of that is like self-correcting, like learning, and how much of that is like going to the extreme is interesting. And I guess like definitely with like physicality, you definitely do get more scared of like, for example, falling down, and like the height thing that you were talking about. It's interesting.
Yeah, like I think I'm more squeamish now than I used to. Like I'm not hella squeamish, but like, you know, things like I don't know, like I think that I am now more kind of like, I have more of a sort of reaction to, you know, like blood or injury or things like that than when I was younger. Like I never like liked kind of gory movies or what have you, but I think my tolerance for that sort of stuff is definitely going down as I get older, rather than becoming more like hardened and blasé.
I have the exact same thing actually. Really? Yeah, I'm getting much more squeamish as I go.
I'm the opposite. I'm just degraded.
I used to be really into all of the gory shit. Yeah, but like interestingly, there's also, I am much more put off by some foods now than I used to be, but that comes with a lack of fear of what people will think of me if I just am like, this looks disgusting, fuck this shit. Like, I'm less worried about what people think about my tastes in food now. But
I wonder that about gory films as well. You know, as I've matured, I don't feel the need to prove myself by watching unpleasant things.
Oh no, the proving myself with watching unpleasant things was not as much as the academic, oh, this exists, let's look at this. See, this kind of deep sea parasite.
See, I've gone completely the opposite way. Like when I was growing up, I had zero interest in horror movies at all, or like gore generally. And like the other night, we were with our bubble watching, spoilers, Parasite.
Oh yeah, hold on. Well, wave at me when the spoilers are over.
We just go.
Well, no, okay, just get bad. Things get real bad, and like in the last half hour or so, Bracken is just watching, just horrified, and I'm just cackling hysterically the whole time.
It was so good though. It was so good.
I really can't deal. I don't know how I dealt with that movie, but it was so good. Like I don't watch horror and I don't like gore, but
Then they might be discussing Parasite for a while. We just go.
It was really worthwhile.
We're gonna go.
We should say goodbye to the catch-up crew. Oh, okay. We're gonna say goodbye to the catch-up crew, and then we're gonna go. So
and you can discuss Parasite some more.
Discussing Parasite because I really want to see it. Catch-up crew. I hope that you enjoyed Parasite, or that if you haven't seen it, that you have not listened to spoilers, and I hope that you are only getting more fearful and cautious in a way that helps your life, and that you don't have to eat gross food if you don't want to. We love you. Goodbye, catch-up crew. Goodbye.
Story time.